The Archive of Forgotten Worlds. The Discovery. James Rivera never expected to find anything important in Sector 9. Most salvagers avoided it completely. The region was too far from trade routes, too empty of valuable wreckage. But James needed credits badly, and sometimes desperation led to interesting places. His scanner blinked. Something massive was ahead, hidden in an asteroid field. "Computer, what am I looking at?" James asked. "Unknown structure. Estimated size, 50 kilometers in diameter. Power signature detected. Warning, structure is older than current scanning database can calculate." James felt his pulse quicken. In 20 years of salvaging, he had never found anything the computer couldn't identify. He moved his small ship, the Wanderer, closer to investigate. Through the asteroids, a structure emerged. It was a perfect sphere, made of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly with blue light. They weren't from any language James recognized, and he knew most galactic languages. He found a docking port and connected his ship. The airlock opened smoothly, as if it had been waiting for him. Inside the archive. The interior was breathtaking. James stood in a massive hall with walls that stretched up farther than his light could reach. The walls were covered entirely with shelves, and the shelves held millions of crystalline objects that glowed softly. "Hello?" James called out. His voice echoed strangely, as if the space was even larger than it appeared. A light appeared in the distance, floating toward him. As it got closer, James saw it was some kind of hologram. It took the shape of a tall, thin being with 4 arms and large, gentle eyes. "Welcome, traveler," the hologram said in perfect English. "I am Keeper Seln, or rather, I am a memory of Keeper Seln. Welcome to the Universal Archive." James stared. "Universal Archive? I've never heard of it." "That is not surprising," Seln said sadly. "The archive has been abandoned for 847,000 years. You are the first living being to enter in all that time." James tried to process that number. "Nearly 1,000,000 years. What is this place?" "The Universal Archive was built by the First Coalition," Seln explained. "Long before your species existed, long before most current species existed. 13 ancient civilizations came together to create this place. Its purpose, to preserve the knowledge of every species that ever reached the stars." Seln gestured to the glowing crystals on the shelves. "Each of these contains the complete knowledge of a civilization. Their history, their science, their art, their philosophy. Everything they wanted future generations to remember." "Why was it abandoned?" James asked. Seln's holographic form seemed to dim. "The First Coalition fell. War, plague, natural disasters, each species had its own ending. One by one, they disappeared. I am the last keeper, or at least, the last keeper's recorded consciousness. I have waited here alone, maintaining the archive, hoping someone would come." James walked slowly along the shelves. Millions of crystals. Millions of dead civilizations. "How many species are recorded here?" 3,400,712, Seln said. "From bacteria that learned to work together, to beings of pure energy. All gone now. All forgotten except for what remains here." The request. James picked up one of the crystals carefully. It was warm to the touch and pulsed with inner light. "What happened to all of them?" "Many things," Seln said. "Some destroyed themselves in wars. Some fell to diseases they couldn't cure. Some were wiped out by cosmic disasters. Some simply evolved into something else and forgot what they had been. The universe is very old, and very dangerous. Survival is rare." James felt a chill. His own species, humanity, had nearly destroyed itself 3 times in the past 500 years. They had survived by luck as much as wisdom. "Why are you telling me this?" James asked. Seln moved closer. "Because I have a request. The archive's power systems are failing. I have perhaps 100 years left before everything shuts down permanently. These crystals will survive, but without power, no one will be able to access them. The knowledge will exist, but it will be locked away forever. What do you want me to do? Take one crystal, Seln said. Just one. Choose any species you wish. Take their knowledge back to your people. Let at least one of these civilizations be remembered. Let their existence mean something. James looked at the millions of crystals. Only one? Why not all of them? Your ship cannot carry more than one safely. The crystals are quantum locked. They cannot be copied or transmitted. Each one must be physically transported. And you, I suspect, do not have time or resources to make millions of trips. Seln was right. James was barely surviving as a salvager. He couldn't afford to make even one more trip out here, let alone millions. How do I choose? James asked, feeling overwhelmed. How do I decide which civilization deserves to be remembered? That is the burden I place upon you, Seln said gently. Choose wisely. Choose with your heart. The species you select will be the only one to truly survive beyond this archive. The choice. James spent hours walking through the archive. Seln followed, explaining what each crystal contained when James asked. There were species that had mastered technology beyond anything humanity could imagine. Species that had created art so beautiful that viewing it could change your entire understanding of the universe. Species that had lived in peace for millions of years before a cosmic disaster ended them. How could he choose? Finally, James found himself in a section that Seln said contained young species. Civilizations that had only lasted a few thousand years before ending. One crystal caught his attention. It was smaller than the others and glowed with a warm, orange light. Tell me about this one, James said. Seln examined it. Ah, the Varini. They were interesting. They only had space travel for 300 years before their sun went supernova. They barely had time to leave their home system. Then why are they here? They don't sound impressive. Because of what they did in their final years, Seln said. When the Varini discovered their sun would explode, they had time to evacuate. They could have saved perhaps 2% of their population. Instead, they chose to save their biosphere. What do you mean? They used their ships to collect genetic samples from every species on their planet. Millions of life forms. Then they programmed automated ships to spread those genetic codes throughout the galaxy. The Varini themselves died with their world, but they ensured that life, any life, would continue. James held the crystal, feeling its warmth. They chose to save everything except themselves? Yes. They believed that life itself was more important than their individual species. Their final message, recorded here, says, "We are ending, but life goes on. We are content with this trade." James made his decision. I'm taking this one. Seln seemed surprised. Not one of the great empires? Not one of the species that lasted millions of years? No, James said firmly. Those empires fell despite their power. The Varini understood something more important, that survival isn't about how long you last, it's about what you leave behind. The warning. As James prepared to leave, Seln gave him a warning. The crystal contains more than just information. It contains a communication protocol. If you activate it properly, it will broadcast a message across all human networks. The Varini story will be shared instantly with every human in the galaxy. That sounds perfect, James said. Perhaps, Seln said carefully. But consider, humanity is young. You have been in space for less than 600 years. You are still learning, still growing. The knowledge of how the Varini died, how 3 million other species died, might frighten your people. It might make them desperate. Or it might make them wise, James said. If we learn from these failures, maybe we won't repeat them. Or maybe you will see how dangerous the universe is and become paralyzed by fear, Seln countered. The choice is yours, but choose carefully. James secured the crystal in a special container. I'll think about it. But I'm taking this back. Then my purpose is fulfilled, Seln said. The hologram began to fade. The archive's power will last perhaps another century. Maybe someone else will come. Maybe more species will be remembered. But even if they are not, one will survive in memory. Thank you, human. Wait, James said. What about you? Your recorded consciousness. Could I take you too? Seln smiled sadly. No. I am bound to the archive. I cannot leave. But that is acceptable. I have seen my purpose completed. That is enough for any life, real or recorded. The hologram disappeared. James stood alone in the vast archive, surrounded by the forgotten memories of millions of civilizations. He held the Verini crystal tight and made his way back to his ship. The journey home. The trip back to human space took 3 weeks. During that time, James couldn't stop thinking about Seln's warning. Should he broadcast the Verini's message to all of humanity? Or should he keep it contained, shared only with scientists and historians? The Verini had chosen to save life instead of themselves. That was noble. But would humanity see it that way? Or would they see it as a cautionary tale about extinction? James also thought about the other 3 million crystals in the archive. All those civilizations, all that knowledge, slowly dying in the dark. It felt wrong to save only one. But what else could he do? As he approached Mars Station, the largest human outpost in the sector, James made his decision. He would tell the truth. All of it. Humanity deserved to know they weren't the first, and that survival wasn't guaranteed. Maybe it would scare them. Maybe it would inspire them. But hiding the truth felt like dishonoring the Verini and every other species in the archive. The message. The broadcast. James docked at Mars Station and immediately requested a meeting with the Science Council. They didn't believe him at first. An ancient archive? Millions of extinct species? It sounded like salvager nonsense. Then he showed them the crystal. Dr. Sarah Chan, head of xenoarchaeology, nearly dropped it when James placed it in her hands. This is real, she whispered. The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. This is older than old. The council assembled quickly. 20 scientists, historians, and government officials gathered to hear James's story. He told them everything: the archive, Keeper Seln, the 3 million dead civilizations, and the Verini who chose to save life instead of themselves. When he finished, the room was silent. Finally, Director Zhang spoke. You said this crystal can broadcast a message across all human networks? That's what Seln told me, James confirmed. We should study it first, said Dr. Chen. Carefully. We don't know what else it might contain. There could be dangers. Or we could honor the Verini's wish, said Professor Williams, a historian. They wanted their message shared. They wanted to be remembered. Isn't that why they recorded it? The debate lasted for hours. Some wanted to keep the crystal secret, studying it slowly over decades. Others wanted to broadcast immediately, sharing the Verini's story with all of humanity. James listened to them argue and felt frustrated. You're all missing the point, he finally said. The room went quiet, looking at him. The Verini didn't record their message for scientists to study in secret laboratories, James continued. They recorded it for everyone. For ordinary people. For species they would never meet. They wanted their choice to matter, to inspire others. Keeping it secret betrays everything they died for. Director Zhang studied him. And what do you think we should do, Salvador Rivera? Broadcast it, James said without hesitation. Let every human hear their story. Let us decide together what it means. The Verini's message. After more debate, the council agreed. They would broadcast the Verini's message, but with context. They would explain the archive, the extinction of millions of species, and the choice humanity now faced. Dr. Chen worked with James to activate the crystal properly. It required a simple touch from the one who carried it, James, and a command in any language. The crystal would handle the rest. James held the crystal under the broadcast transmitters. Every human in the galaxy would receive this message simultaneously. Billions of people about to learn that humanity was young, fragile, and far from alone in the universe's long history. Ready? Dr. Chen asked. James nodded. Activate message. Universal broadcast. The crystal blazed with orange light. The light split into millions of tiny beams, each one carrying data. The station's transmitters caught the beams and amplified them, sending them across the quantum communication network that connected all human worlds. In homes, ships, stations, and colonies across human space, screens suddenly activated. The Varini's message began to play. Understanding the Varini. The message started with images. A planet, beautiful and blue-green, orbiting a yellow sun. Cities that looked like they were grown rather than built, with architecture that flowed like water frozen in stone. The Varini themselves appeared, tall beings with 4 legs and 2 arms, covered in fur that changed colors with their emotions. Then, the science. The Varini showed their discovery that their sun was dying. They had only 50 years before it would explode. Their scientists calculated they could evacuate 2% of their population, about 400 million Varini out of 20 billion. The message showed the great debate among the Varini. Some wanted to save as many of their own as possible. Others wanted to save their culture, their art, their history. But the majority chose a different path. A Varini leader appeared, their fur shifting through colors that somehow conveyed deep emotion even across species. When the translation came through, James felt tears in his eyes. We are Varini, the leader said. We are ending. But we realized that we are not the important part of our world. Life is the important part. We are merely one expression of life among millions. The message showed the Varini's final decades. They built ships, thousands of them, but not for evacuation. They collected genetic samples from every living thing on their planet. From the smallest bacteria to the largest creatures. They encoded millions of species into quantum storage and programmed the ships to scatter across the galaxy. We will die, the Varini leader continued. Our cities will burn. Our art will be lost. Our history will be forgotten. But life will continue. In 1,000 worlds, in 1,000,000 years, new species will emerge from the seeds we plant today. They will never know us. They will never thank us. And that is perfect. The final images showed the Varini's last days. As their sun began to expand, they gathered in great groups, holding each other, watching the sky. They died peacefully, satisfied that they had done something meaningful. The message ended with a question that appeared in every human language: what will you choose when your ending comes? Humanity's response. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Across human space, people stopped working to discuss the message. Schools held emergency assemblies. Governments called special sessions. Religious leaders of every faith tried to understand what the Varini's choice meant for their beliefs. Some people were terrified. They formed groups demanding that humanity begin preparing for extinction immediately. They wanted to build bunkers, create backup colonies, develop technologies to prevent any possible disaster. Others were inspired. They saw the Varini's choice as the ultimate act of love, loving life itself more than their own survival. Environmental movements grew stronger. Scientists studying Earth's remaining biosphere received unprecedented funding. But the most interesting response came from ordinary people. Across human worlds, people began making small changes. They planted gardens with rare species. They recorded oral histories before they were lost. They reached out to neighbors they had ignored. They acted as if their time was limited and they wanted to leave something good behind. James watched the news reports from his small apartment on Mars Station. He had expected chaos, maybe panic. Instead, he saw something he hadn't anticipated: unity. Humanity had learned they were part of a much larger story. They weren't the first intelligent species, and they wouldn't be the last. But while they existed, they could choose what they stood for. The Archive Project. 3 months after the broadcast, Director Zhang contacted James with an offer. "We're organizing an expedition to the archive," she said. "We want to save as many crystals as we can. We're building a ship large enough to carry thousands of them. We need someone who knows the archive to lead the expedition." James was surprised. "Me? I'm just a salvager." "You're the only human who has been there," Zhang said. "And more importantly, you understood what the Varini were trying to say. We need that understanding to guide this project." The Archive Project became humanity's largest scientific endeavor. Hundreds of ships were built, each designed to carry precious cargo across the galaxy. Thousands of volunteers signed up to spend years traveling back and forth to Sector 9, bringing forgotten civilizations back to human space. They couldn't save all 3 million crystals, that would take centuries. But they could save many. Each crystal would be placed in a new archive on Earth, available for anyone to access. The knowledge of the ancients would be preserved and shared. James led the first expedition back to the archive 6 months after his initial discovery. When he docked, Keeper Seln's hologram appeared again, looking surprised. "You returned," Seln said. "And you brought others." "We're going to save as many as we can," James explained. "We're building a new archive. The knowledge won't be lost." Seln's hologram seemed to glow brighter. "Why? You are young. You have your own problems. Why spend resources saving the memories of the dead?" "Because the Varini taught us something," James said. "They taught us that what we leave behind matters more than how long we survive. If we can preserve these civilizations, if we can learn from their mistakes and their wisdom, maybe we'll make better choices. Maybe we'll last longer. Or maybe we won't, but at least we'll have tried to honor those who came before." The new understanding. Over the next decades, humanity brought thousands of crystals back from the archive. Each one was studied, translated, and shared with the public. Humanity learned about species that had solved problems humans still struggled with. They learned about mistakes that had destroyed civilizations that seemed indestructible. The knowledge changed humanity in subtle ways. Wars became less common as people realized how fragile intelligent life was. Environmental protection became central to human society. The arts flourished as humans explored creative expressions from thousands of cultures. But the most important change was philosophical. Humanity stopped thinking of itself as the center of the universe. They understood they were young, still learning, still growing. They were part of a long chain of intelligent species stretching back millions of years. And they understood that their ending would come someday, not next year, maybe not for another million years, but eventually. The question wasn't if humanity would end, but what they would choose to leave behind. James's final visit. James made one final trip to the archive when he was old. The archive was nearly empty now. Most of the crystals had been transported to the new archive on Earth. Only a few remained, the ones too fragile to move safely. Keeper Seln's hologram met him in the Great Hall, now mostly empty. "The archive will shut down soon," Seln said. "The power finally fails. But we succeeded. Most of the knowledge survived. You kept your promise." "I kept the Varini's promise," James corrected. "They started this by choosing life over themselves." "No," Seln said gently. "You started this by choosing one crystal. You could have taken the greatest empire, the longest-lasting species, the most powerful civilization. But you chose the Varini because you understood what mattered. That wisdom is what saved the archive." James sat down, his old bones tired from the journey. "What will happen to you when the power fails?" "I will stop," Seln said simply. "I am a recording, not a life. But I am content. I have seen my purpose fulfilled. The knowledge is preserved. Future species will learn from the past. That is enough." "Will anyone remember you?" James asked. "The keepers who maintained this place for so long?" Seln paused. "Perhaps not. We are not important. The knowledge is important. No, James said firmly. You're wrong. You are important. Without keepers like you, without people willing to preserve knowledge even when it seemed pointless, none of this would exist. James pulled out a small crystal, one he had brought from Earth. This is a new kind of memory crystal. Human-made, but based on what we learned from the archive. It contains the story of Keeper Seln and all the other keepers. Their sacrifice. Their dedication. Their choice to maintain the archive even after their species died. He placed the crystal in the archive's central chamber, in the section marked Keepers and Guardians. Now you'll be remembered too, James said. Seln's hologram flickered, and James could have sworn he saw emotion in that ancient recording. Thank you, human. Thank you for remembering those who remember. The legacy. James died 3 years later, at the age of 89. His funeral was attended by thousands. He was remembered not as a great scientist or a political leader, but as the salvager who taught humanity to honor the past. The new archive on Earth became humanity's most visited site. Children learned about extinct civilizations in school. Artists created works inspired by ancient cultures. Scientists built on knowledge that was millions of years old. And every year, on the anniversary of the Varini's ending, humanity held a day of remembrance. Not just for the Varini, but for all the species that had come before. People planted gardens, shared stories, created art, and asked themselves the Varini's question, what will you choose when your ending comes? Humanity didn't know how long they would last. Maybe another 1,000 years. Maybe 1,000,000. Maybe they would find a way to survive forever, though that seemed unlikely. The universe was dangerous, and all things ended eventually. But they knew what they would leave behind, knowledge preserved, life protected, and the choice to honor those who came before them. The archive of forgotten worlds was no longer forgotten. And humanity, still young and learning, had found its purpose not in survival, but in remembrance. The Varini's message had been heard. And humanity had chosen to answer it with action.